During a routine personnel audit at St. Mary's Convent in Massachusetts, Administrator Maria Doyle noticed something chilling. 3 elderly nuns were marked as transferred to long-term care, yet the hospital listed had no record of them. As she dug deeper, Maria uncovered a dark conspiracy within the church, a secret order silencing dissent to protect buried scandals. The deeper she searched, the more dangerous the truth became. Maria Doyle adjusted the thick woolen scarf around her neck as a chill wind swept across the courtyard of St. Mary's Convent. The early winter sun hung low, casting long pale shadows across the worn cobblestones. The convent, nestled on the outskirts of Boston, stood like a forgotten relic of an older world, high stone walls, narrow arched windows, and the faint scent of incense lingering in the crisp air. It was the kind of place where time seemed to stall, where the outside world remained an indistinct hume beyond the iron gates. Maria had been working as an administrative assistant at St. Mary's for just over a year. Young, sharp-eyed, and quietly ambitious, she had accepted the job hoping it would offer stability and purpose. Her mornings were often filled with the rustle of papers, the soft clacking of typewriter keys, and the occasional chime of the old brass bell summoning her to assist the elder nuns. On this particular Monday morning, the air inside the convent felt unusually tense. Whispers traveled along the stone corridors like restless ghosts. Maria noticed the nuns' hurried footsteps and the rare sight of Sister Joan, the strict Mother Superior, walking briskly with a leather-bound folder clutched tightly to her chest. Maria, Sister Joan had called earlier that morning, her voice cool but laced with urgency. "We saw her conducting an annual personnel inventory. I need you to verify and cross-reference to the transfer records with the hospital adventures." Maria nodded. She had always found Sister Joan intimidating, her tall frame wrapped in immaculate robes, her piercing gray eyes capable of silencing a room. "Of course, Sister. I'll begin right away." The task seemed straightforward enough. The convent kept meticulous records. After all, order and routine were sacrosanct here. But as Maria sifted through the thick stack of personnel files in the cramped archives room, something caught her eye. 3 names: Sister Agnes Mullins, Sister Bernadette Lavoie, and Sister Claire Donovan, each listed as having been transferred for long-term care to St. Catherine's Hospital 3 weeks prior. Maria frowned. She distinctly remembered seeing Sister Agnes in the garden not 2 weeks ago, her frail hands lovingly tending to the withered rosebushes. Sister Claire had played the organ at Mass just last Sunday. The entries didn't match the rhythm of life Maria had observed daily within these ancient walls. Curious, Maria retrieved the official transfer forms. The documents were neatly typed, bearing the familiar St. Mary's letterhead, but something felt. The signature line for the attending physician was blank, and the transport log referenced a third-party medical courier with no contact details. Puzzled, Maria picked up the phone and dialed the main admissions desk at St. Catherine's Hospital. After a few rings, "St. Catherine's, how may I assist you?" "Good morning," Maria began, glancing again at the forms. "This is Maria Doyle from St. Mary's Convent. I'm following up on the recent admissions of 3 of our sisters, Agnes Mullins, Bernadette Lavoie, and Claire Donovan. Could you confirm their current status for our records?" A pause. The clerk on the other end shuffled through her database. "I'm sorry, ma'am, we have no record of those patients being admitted here. Are you certain of the names and dates?" Mary's heart gave a small, uneasy thump. "Yes, the transfer was recorded as occurring on November 5th. Another pause. "No, nothing matches. Perhaps they were sent to another facility?" "No, they were supposed to come to St. Catherine's," Maria insisted softly. "Thank you for checking." Hanging up, Maria stared at the receiver for a long moment, her mind racing. Why would the record state otherwise? Why had no one mentioned such a significant transfer? Rising from her desk, she made her way to Sister Joan's office. The old wood-candled room smelled faintly of lavender polish and burning candles. Sister Joan looked up from her ledger as Maria entered. "Yes?" "Sister," Maria said carefully, choosing her words. "I've reviewed the transfer documents for Sisters Agnes, Bernadette, and Claire, but when I called St. Catherine's, they had no record of receiving them." For a fleeting second, something flickered across Sister Joan's face. Surprise, annoyance, perhaps fear, but it vanished behind her usual composed mask. "There must be some clerical error. I will handle it. Please continue your assigned duties, Miss Doyle." Dismissed. Maria left the office with a growing sense of unease gnawing at her. Clerical errors were not tolerated at St. Mary's. The precision of their records was near religious. And 3 missing sisters? It was not something easily explained away. That evening, long after most had retired to their simple stone cells, Maria lingered in the archives. By the dim light of a brass desk lamp, she began pulling more files: transport logs, visitor records, maintenance requests. She noticed that all references to the transfer shared the same anomalies: missing signatures, vague transport details, no follow-up care notes. It was as if the sisters had been quietly erased. The final clue of the night sent a chill through her. Buried among the receipts and memos was a crumpled note, handwritten and unsigned, slipped between 2 personnel folders. "They are not safe. Ask no more." Maria sat back, heart pounding. A cold knot of dread settled in her stomach. She knew then that something was very wrong at St. Mary's, and that if she wanted answers, she would have to be careful. Very careful. The next morning, Maria arrived early, her mind still reeling from the unanswered questions swirling around the missing sisters. The convent felt heavier somehow, its ancient stone walls pressing in with a suffocating weight. Outside, the winter wind whispered through the barren branches of the convent's solitary oak tree, its skeletal limbs scratching against the window panes like skeletal fingers seeking entry. Inside, the corridors were quieter than usual, as if the building itself was holding its breath. After her usual morning tasks, Maria made her way toward the quarters of Sister Agnes. The elder nun's room remained untouched since her supposed transfer. No one had dared disturb it to her for administrative duties. Maria unlocked the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The air was thick with the lingering scent of lavender and mothballs. The sparse room held few personal effects: a single narrow bed, a modest wooden desk, a small crucifix above the headboard. On the desk, an open prayer book lay next to a tarnished brass lamp. A battered leather-bound notebook caught Maria's attention. It rested beneath the prayer book, its worn spine suggesting years of use. Maria hesitated briefly, then picked it up, flipping carefully through its pages. The notebook revealed a simple record of Sister Agnes's daily expenses, minor purchases from the convent store, offerings made at Mass, occasional notes about visitors. Most of the entries were mundane and unremarkable, but as Maria reached the final page, her breath caught. Scrawled in the precise, looping script of the elder nun were the words, "Meeting Father Matthew at the side house, 5 p.m., day of transfer." Maria's pulse quickened. The side house, a small brick structure behind the main chapel, was seldom used. It had once served as temporary lodging for visiting clergy, but now stood darkly forgotten, its windows darkened with dust. The entry raised troubling implications. Why would Sister Agnes arrange a private meeting with Father Matthew on the very day of her mysterious transfer? And why had no one mentioned this? Determined to seek answers, Maria waited until after the morning Mass to approach Father Matthew. The parish priest was a man of imposing stature, with a booming voice and a sharp intellect honed over years in the clergy. Though generally well-liked, he carried an air of inscrutability that unsettled Maria. She found him in the rectory library, leafing through a worn volume of theological discourse. "Father Matthew," Maria began, forcing her voice to remain steady, "may I ask you something?" The priest looked up. "What troubles you?" Maria held the notebook loosely in her hands, careful not to appear accusatory. "I was reviewing Sister Agnes's belongings and found a note about meeting you at the side house on the day of her transfer. Did you see her that evening?" For a moment, an almost imperceptible flicker crossed Father Matthew's face, surprise, perhaps unease, but he quickly recovered. "No," he replied evenly. "I was attending a diocesan meeting outside the city that day. I only returned late in the evening." Maria pressed gently. "You're certain? The note was quite clear." The priest's gaze hardened slightly. "I understand your concern, Miss Doyle, but I was not present. The sisters' transfers were handled by the administration, not by me. I suggest you direct further questions to Sister Joan." Though outwardly polite, his tone carried an undercurrent of finality, a subtle warning to tread carefully. Maria thanked him and withdrew, though her instincts screamed that something was amiss. That afternoon, unable to shake her growing suspicions, she sought out Brother Elias, the convent's aging groundskeeper and unofficial custodian of its forgotten corners. The wiry old man had worked at St. Mary's for decades and knew every stone and shadow of the place. She found him in the maintenance shed, meticulously oiling a set of ancient hinges. After exchanging pleasantries, Maria broached the subject carefully. "Brother Elias, do the security cameras around the side house still work?" The old man scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Aye, most of 'em do. The one over the back gate's been acting up, but the camera by the side house was serviced last month." "Why do you ask?" Maria hesitated, then confided in him about the note and her unanswered questions. The groundskeeper regarded her with a sharp, appraising look, then nodded. "If you truly wish to see, I can show you the footage, but be mindful, some things are better left alone in a place like this." Maria's resolve hardened. "Please, brother, I need to know." Together, they made their way to the small security office tucked behind the main kitchen, where the convent's camera feeds were recorded onto a battered hard drive. Brother Elias operated the system with surprising ease, navigating through folders until he located the footage from the evening in question. The grainy black-and-white video played out in eerie silence. For the first few hours, the scene remained still, nothing but shifting shadows and the occasional gust of wind rustling the ivy-clapped walls. Then, at precisely 4:57 p.m., movement appeared at the edge of the frame. A large white box truck, devoid of any visible markings or license plates, eased into view and stopped near the side house. The driver remained obscured, but moments later, two figures, both cloaked in heavy coats and hats, emerged from the truck. They moved with practiced efficiency, entering the side house through its rear door. Maria's pulse thundered in her ears as the footage continued. Approximately 15 minutes later, the same figures re-emerged, supporting a third person between them, an elderly woman, her frail form unmistakable even through the distortion of the camera. Sister Agnes. Without hesitation, they loaded her into the back of the truck. Within seconds, the vehicle reversed smoothly out of frame, vanishing into the encroaching darkness. Maria stared at the screen, her mouth dry. The timestamp left no doubt. The truck had arrived precisely when Sister Agnes's note had indicated. Father Matthew's denial now hung like a shroud of falsehood over the fragile trust she had placed in him. Turning to Brother Elias, she whispered, "Can you make me a copy of this footage?" The old man's eyes twinkled with both caution and quiet support. "I can, but be careful, child. You may not like where this road leads." As Maria left the security office, the winter wind outside seemed colder than before, its mournful howl echoing through the stone corridors. Clutching the flash drive tightly, she knew that the web of deception at St. Mary's was deeper and darker than she had imagined. The question now was how far she was willing to go to uncover the truth. Maria spent a restless night, the grainy image of the white truck looping endlessly in her mind, each frame etched with growing dread. Morning brought little relief. The convent hummed with its usual rhythms, bells chiming for matins, the soft rustle of habits in the stone hallways, but for Maria, the weight of what she had discovered pressed heavy against her chest. The memory of Sister Agnes being led away by unknown figures haunted her. Someone inside St. Mary's was lying. Worse, others might be complicit. Determined to probe deeper, Maria decided she needed to gather more first-hand accounts, particularly from anyone who might have been close to the missing sisters. Her first thought was of Nurse Catherine Brandt, one of the few lay staff permitted regular access to the infirmary. Catherine was in her late 50s, a sturdy woman with kind eyes and a reputation for discretion. If anyone had noticed unusual behavior, it would be her. Maria found her that afternoon in the sunlit infirmary, arranging medications on a polished oak cart. After a moment's hesitation, Maria approached. "Catherine," she began softly, glancing around to ensure they were alone. "May I ask you something, privately?" The nurse straightened, reading the tension in Maria's expression. "Of course. Let's talk in my office." They moved to a small adjoining room where the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. Catherine closed the door and gestured for Maria to sit. "What's troubling you, dear?" Maria wasted no time. It's about the sisters who were transferred. Agnes, Bernadette, and Claire. Have you noticed anything odd about them in the days leading up to it?" Catherine's expression darkened. For a moment she seemed to weigh her words carefully. Finally she spoke. "I don't know about the others, but Sister Claire, yes, she was different. Anxious, jumpy. Normally she was so serene, but that last week she barely slept, kept pacing the corridors at night." Maria leaned in. "Did she say anything at all?" Catherine nodded slowly. "One night I found her in the infirmary storeroom, sitting on the floor. She looked frightened. I asked if she was unwell. She just shook her head and whispered, 'We know too much. We can't stay silent forever.' Then she begged me not to tell anyone. I thought she was under stress. Old cases sometimes resurface, you know, but now, with them gone—" Her voice past quickened. "Did she mention what they knew?" "About what?" Catherine shook her head. "No, but she was terrified." Maria thanked her, promising discretion, and left the infirmary deep in thought. Sister Claire's words suggested something bigger than an ordinary transfer, something dangerous enough to provoke fear. But what had she meant? What did they know? That evening Maria returned to the records office under the pretense she had another goal: the convent's telephone logs. Every call made from the main office phone was automatically recorded in a monthly ledger for accounting purposes, a habit born from the convent's old-fashioned adherence to paper records. Maria retrieved the most recent ledger from the locked cabinet, her fingers trembling slightly as she flipped through the columns. Most entries were mundane: calls to suppliers, diocese offices, a few parishioners, but one line caught her eye. November 5th, 4:12 p.m., duration 9 minutes, number dialed 617555047. The notation simply read, "External Public Line." Maria frowned. That number wasn't familiar. Grabbing her phone, she searched online for any listing, but the number returned no residential or business matches. Digging deeper, she cross-referenced the number with a local database of public utilities and disused infrastructure. Her breath caught when she found the match. The number had once been assigned to a payphone located at the Old Harbor District, specifically near Pier 9, an abandoned terminal no longer in official operation since the derevulequent, known among locals as a haunt for the homeless and drifters. Why would anyone from St. Mary's place a call there? And why on the very afternoon of the sisters' transfer? The timing was too precise to ignore. Maria photocopied the relevant page and replaced the ledger, her mind racing. This new thread hinted at an external connection, someone outside the convent involved in whatever was unfolding. The sisters hadn't simply vanished into administrative limbo. They had been taken, possibly against their will, and there were signs of deliberate orchestration. Maria knew she couldn't pursue this lead alone, but who could she trust? The circle of safety within the convent was shrinking fast. Sister Joan seemed compromised. Father Matthew had lied. Only a handful of staff remained untouched by suspicion. That night, unable to rest, Maria stared at her bedroom ceiling, the events of the past days swirling through her mind. The image of Sister Claire's haunted whisper echoed in the silence. "We know too much." Coupled with the unexplained call to the harbor, it painted a chilling picture. Someone inside the convent had reached out to the outside world on the very day of the disappearances. For what purpose and to whom remained maddeningly unclear. But Maria was certain of one thing: the truth was buried beneath layers of fear and deceit, and she was already in too deep to turn back now. As dawn's pale light filtered through the frosted window, a new resolve crystallized within her. It was time to follow the trail beyond the convent's stone walls. She would start at the Old Harbor. Whatever answers awaited her there, Maria knew she had to find them, before someone else decided she knew too much as well. The next morning Maria left her room early, her nerves strung tight from the restless hours spent turning Sister Claire's whispered warning and the mysterious call to the harbor over in her mind. The icy air bit at her face as she crossed the courtyard, the sun casting thin, reluctant light over the gray stones of St. Mary's. The convent looked unchanged, its towering walls and weathered archways giving no hint of the dark current swirling beneath its serene facade. But Maria felt the tension thickening in every hallway she passed. Determined to verify whether any further evidence existed, Maria decided to check the convent's internal camera system. Brother Elias had shown her the feed for the exterior cameras, but the interior ones, located in key hallways, entryways, and near the infirmary, were housed on a separate system maintained within the main records office, where only a few had access. Under the pretense of organizing files, Maria slipped into the dim, musty room in the west wing, where the CCTV system was kept. The large metal cabinet containing the recording equipment stood against the far wall, humming softly. Heart pounding, she opened the cabinet and stared in disbelief. The hard drive bay sat empty. Where 3 heavy black drives should have been, only a few disconnected cables dangled uselessly. A small piece of masking tape fluttered from one side of the panel. On it, a hastily scrawled note read, "Maintenance equipment underway." Maria's breath caught. She had reviewed the maintenance logs the previous week. No scheduled work had been listed, certainly not for the CTC system. Worse, flipping through the system's diagnostic screen, Maria saw that the last recorded footage available ended precisely 3 days before the transfers. All footage for the critical days leading up to the sisters' disappearance had been removed. Someone had deliberately scrubbed the record. The cabinet, Agent Maria, locked the cabinet and exited quickly, her mind racing. The implications were chilling. Someone with high-level access had not only orchestrated the physical removal of the sisters, but had taken steps to erase all visual evidence inside the convent. The web of conspiracy was deeper than she had feared. That afternoon, as Maria wandered through the convent's common spaces, her mind consumed with mounting dread, she overheard 2 young novices chatting quietly in the cloister garden. Their hushed voices carried confusion in the closest plant. As she listened, one novice, Sister Helena, barely 20, was saying, "Last week, a man in plain clothes came and spoke with Sister Joan. He said he was from the local police and would be providing extra security during the transfers. I saw him near the chapel with a radio." The other novice frowned. "But why would the police come here? And why plain clothes? That's not normal, is it?" Helen shrugged. Maria's heart thudded painfully. She waited until the novices moved on before hurrying back to her room. Grabbing her phone, she dialed the main desk of the local police precinct, her voice carefully calm. "Good afternoon," she said when a clerk answered. "This is Maria Doyle from St. Mary's Convent. I'm following up regarding the officer who was recently assigned to assist here during a special security operation." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the clerk replied. "We have no record of any officer assigned to St. Mary's in the past 2 weeks. In fact, no requests for assistance from your convent have been processed here." Maria thanked her, her hand trembling as she ended the call. The man in plain clothes had not been sent by the police. Whoever he was, he had been part of the covert effort to remove the sisters and likely to ensure no interference from within. The layers of deception were multiplying. Someone had ordered the footage erased. Someone had planted an impostor to control the convent's environment during the operation, and Sister Joan appeared to be complicit, her authority used to enforce silence. Maria's head spun. With each discovery, the danger she faced grew clearer. Yet the more truth she uncovered, the more determined she became. She couldn't walk away now, not when the stakes had risen so high, not when the faces of the missing sisters haunted her every step. There was more to find, and Maria knew exactly where she needed to look next. Maria spent the rest of that restless day replaying every detail in her mind. The missing footage, the imposter security agent, the tightened circle of secrecy closing in around her. Each thread led deeper into a carefully constructed conspiracy. But if they were willing to erase video evidence and impersonate the police, what else were they hiding? There had to be a root cause, a reason so damning that extreme measures had been set into motion to bury it. The cryptic words of Sister Clare haunted her. "We know too much." Maria suspected the answers might lie not in the present, but in the past, and she knew exactly where she needed to look. That night, long after the convent had settled into uneasy silence, Maria crept down the dim corridor toward the old archives. The narrow hallway was cold, lined with brittle, yellowed ledgers and long-forgotten volumes. At the far end, a heavy oak door marked Records, Restricted stood closed. It was rarely used, and only Sister Joan and the archivist possessed the keys. But Maria, through weeks of quiet observation, had noticed where Sister Joan often stashed a spare key, in the hollow of an old plaster Madonna statue near the chapel. Retrieving the key earlier that evening had been almost too easy. Now, heart pounding, Maria unlocked the door and slipped inside. The air smelled of mildew and aging paper. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Floor-to-ceiling shelves stretched into the shadows, crammed with dusty boxes, leather-bound registers, and brittle files. Moving quickly but carefully, Maria scanned the labels. Most were innocuous. Financial records 1980-1990. Baptism logs, maintenance receipts. But in the farthest corner, behind a stack of disused hymnals, her eyes landed on a box sealed with thick yellow tape. A faded label read, "Internal documents. Do not open without express permission of Mother Superior." Below, scrawled in faded pen, was the year 1995. Maria's breath caught. Why would such old records remain sealed? Driven by instinct, she dragged the box down and sliced carefully through the brittle tape with a letter opener. Inside lay a collection of files bound with string, a few faded photographs, and a stack of typed transcripts. The first document she pulled out was a legal file, Commonwealth of Massachusetts versus St. Mary's Convent, civil case. Her hands trembled as she read further. The case involved multiple allegations of child abuse and mismogdom by members of the convent staff during the late 1980s and early 1990s. Statements from several victims were included, some shockingly explicit in detail, but what froze Maria in place was the list of key witnesses identified within the file. Among them, Sister Agnes Mullins, Sister Bernadette Lavoie, Sister Claire Donovan. The three missing nuns. Maria flipped through the pages feverishly. Testimonies from the three sisters corroborated the victims' accounts, exposing damning patterns of abuse that had, according to the records, reached the upper echelons of the convent's leadership at the time. The case had ultimately been settled quietly, with a large financial payout to the victims' families and a strict gag order imposed on all parties. The convent had narrowly avoided public scandal, but the testimonies of Agnes, Bernadette, and Claire had been essential and potentially dangerous to those who wished to maintain the convent's pristine reputation. Maria's mind raced. The pieces began falling into place. The sisters had carried knowledge capable of destroying the convent's standing, even decades later, and someone had now decided the risk of their continued existence was too great. But why now? Why, after so many years, driven by the need for more, Maria copied the most critical documents and photographs onto a small flash drive, carefully resealing the box and replacing it exactly as she'd found it. Returning to her room, she locked the door behind her and opened her laptop. If anyone could shed light on the current threat, it was someone who had been involved in the case from the start. Maria searched through the legal filings until she found the name of the lead defense attorney for the victims, Thomas Levine, Esq. After a moment's hesitation, she composed a cautious email explaining that she was researching historical records from the convent and had questions regarding the old civil case. To her surprise, within an hour, a reply arrived. "I was just thinking about that case," Levine had written. "Strange timing. Let's speak by phone. I'll call you at 9 a.m. tomorrow." The next morning, Maria answered the call on the first ring. Levine's voice was gravelly but alert. "Miss Doyle, you mentioned the St. Mary's case. You're with the convent?" "I work there in administration," Maria replied carefully. "I found sealed documents about the 1995 case and the witnesses involved. 3 of them are missing." A sharp intake of breath. "I suspected something was happening," Levine said grimly. 2 weeks ago, I received an anonymous letter, no return address, just signed AA. Inside was a typed note. "They are coming to silence us. The sisters are in danger. Please watch carefully." Maria's heart raced. "AA, Sister Agnes?" she whispered. "That's what I thought," Levine continued, "but I didn't know how to verify it. I'd almost dismissed it as the ramblings of an old woman reliving past trauma, until now." Maria swallowed. The letter was real. The sisters are gone, and evidence is being destroyed inside the convent. "Miss Doyle," Levine said gravely, "you're in danger now too. Whoever orchestrated this will stop at nothing to keep it buried. If you have any proof, secure it, and be careful who you trust." Maria's hands shook as she ended the call. The depth of the conspiracy was worse than she'd feared, and someone had already tried to warn the outside world. Someone had tried, but failed. And now, Maria was certain the clock was running out faster than she could imagine. Maria spent the rest of the morning pacing her small room, Levine's warning echoing in her ears. Her pulse still raced, adrenaline sharp in her veins. The sealed documents, the letter from Sister Agnes, and the missing sisters all pointed to a conspiracy of terrifying scale, one that reached beyond the stone walls of St. Mary's. But she needed more. Who had orchestrated their removal? Who had the power to erase evidence, impersonate law enforcement, and monitor every move within the convent? The answer, she suspected, lay in the logistics of the sisters' disappearances. The truck, the transport records, the missing details on the forms. Driven by resolve, Maria returned to the convent's administrative archives. Sister Joan had ordered most of the recent transport records filed under facilities management, a section few visited. In the dusty back shelves of the records room, Maria found the relevant folder marked Vendor Invoices, Q4 2024. Leafing through pages of plumbing receipts and cleaning services, she finally spotted a thin, typed invoice. Logistics services provided, November 5, 2024. Client, St. Mary's Convent. Vendor, Silver Crest Consolidated. The amount billed was large, far more than any normal medical transport fee. No contact number, only a mailing address. Silver Crest Consolidated, Suite 410, 200 Harborview Drive, Boston. Maria frowned. Silvercrest was not a name she recognized from the convent's usual list of approved vendors. A quick online search revealed almost nothing. No company website, no reviews, only a sparse listing in an obscure corporate registry. A shell, a company perhaps. Suspicion mounting, Maria dug deeper, cross-referencing the name against legal databases and investigative forums. After several hours and increasingly arcane search queries, she struck gold on an old discussion thread among investigative journalists. One poster referenced Silvercrest Consolidated as a known front company linked to a controversial group within the church. Ordo Custodii ID, the Order of the Custodians. The term sent a chill through Maria. The custodians, as far as public knowledge extended, were an unofficial, secretive network operating beneath the surface of the church. Their alleged purpose: internal purification, quietly eliminating dissent, neutralizing potential scandals, and maintaining doctrinal and reputational control at any cost. While officially disavowed by church leadership, whispers of their activities had persisted for decades. And now, it appeared they had a direct hand in the disappearances at St. Mary's. Maria leaned back in her chair, her mind spinning. If the custodians were involved, the implications were staggering. This was no isolated cover-up, it was a sanctioned purge. The three sisters had borne witness to abuses capable of shattering the church's fragile veneer of sanctity, and they had paid the price for refusing to remain silent. But why now? What had triggered renewed action after so many years? Maria's hands trembled as she printed them into her file. She had to see Silvercrest's address for herself. The risk was high, but if she could find tangible proof, photographs, connections, anything concrete, she might force the truth into the light. The next morning, under gray, overcast skies, Maria dressed inconspicuously and took the commuter train into Boston. Her heart pounded with each passing station. Harborview Drive lay in a desolate stretch of the old Port District, an area half consumed by redevelopment and half abandoned to decay. The streets smelled of salt and rust, empty save for the occasional shadowed figure lingering near shuttered warehouses. Building 200 loomed at the edge of a cracked asphalt lot, a faceless gray structure with mirrored windows and a single unmarked entrance. Maria's breath fogged in the cold air as she approached. Suite 410, according to the directory, was on the 4th floor. She entered the building cautiously, taking the old freight elevator up. The hallway outside Suite 410 was eerily silent. The door bore no name, only a small keypad and security camera. Clearly not a business welcoming casual visitors. Maria quickly snapped several photos of the door, the directory, and the sparse hallway before making her way back toward the elevator. But as she reached the lobby, a flicker of movement caught her eye, a tall man in a dark overcoat watching her from across the street. His gaze met hers, cold and assessing. Maria's stomach clenched. She turned away, forcing herself to walk calmly down the block. The sound of footsteps behind her quickened. Panic rising, Maria ducked into a narrow alley between two boarded-up storefronts. The man followed. "Miss Doyle," a deep voice called. "We need to talk." Maria whirled, heart hammering. The man stepped into view, his face calm, but his eyes sharp as knives. "You're digging in dangerous places," he said quietly. "For your own good, stop now." Maria's throat tightened. "Who sent you?" she whispered. A faint smile. "Consider this a courtesy warning. The next will not be so polite," vanishing into the foggy morning before she could speak again. Maria stood frozen, her breath ragged. The custodians were watching. And now they knew she was watching too. Maria's hand still trembled as she boarded the late train back to the outskirts, her mind racing with the weight of what had transpired outside Silvercrest's offices. The man's voice haunted her. The next will not be so polite. The custodians knew she was close to something, but the one thing they hadn't done yet was stop her completely, which meant she still had time. Back at the convent, dusk had already settled, casting long shadows through the stained glass windows. The December wind whispered mournfully through the ancient stone walls as Maria slipped through the side entrance and hurried down the corridor. The tension within St. Mary's had grown palpable. Whispers seemed to trail her wherever she went, and she noticed more and more locked doors, more glances exchanged between certain nuns who quickly fell silent as she passed. Word of her inquiries had clearly spread. Alone in her room, Maria reviewed the grainy photos of Silvercrest's suite and compiled her notes. But her instincts screamed that time was running out. There was still a missing link, concrete proof connecting the custodians and the leadership at St. Mary's. Without it, all she had were fragments. She needed a spark to ignite this tinderbox. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Late that evening, as the convent's great bell tolled for compliant, she opened it cautiously and was startled to find Sister Helena standing there, eyes darting nervously down the corridor. The elderly nun's face was pale beneath her wimple, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. "Please," she whispered hoarsely, "may I come in?" Maria nodded quickly and ushered her inside, closing the door behind them. Sister Helena glanced around the small room as if expecting unseen watchers, then leaned in close, her voice barely audible. "I heard what you're trying to do," she began. "I can't stay silent anymore." Maria's heart leapt. "You know something?" Helena's lined face crumpled. "I've known too much for too long. Agnes, she feared this day would come. Before they took her, she told me if anything happened, the truth would be hidden in the old chapel." Maria frowned. "The old chapel?" Helena nodded. "The auxiliary chapel behind the west garden, hardly used now. There's a large wooden crucifix above the altar, very old. Agnes said she hid something inside it, a proof. I don't know more, but you must be careful. There are those here who serve not God, but other masters." Her voice broke on the last words, and tears shimmered in her eyes. Maria placed a steadying hand on her arm. "Thank you, sister. You've done the right thing." Helena squeezed Maria's hand with surprising strength. "Find the truth, and be quick." Then she slipped from the room, vanishing into the dim corridor like a wraith. Maria wasted no time. Grabbing her coat and flashlight, she made her way swiftly through the sleeping convent. The old chapel lay beyond the west garden, an overgrown path winding through frost-lash scruffed to a crumbling stone structure half swallowed by ivy. The wind howled mournfully as Maria forced open the warped oak doors and stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of dust and ancient incense. Faded tapestries hung in tatters along the walls. At the front of the small sanctuary, the massive wooden crucifix loomed above the cracked marble altar. Maria approached it cautiously, her heart pounding. The cross was intricately carved, its surface worn smooth by centuries of reverent touch. Running her fingers along the base, Maria searched for any seam or hollow. At first nothing yielded, but then, guided by instinct, she pressed against a small carved rosette near the lower edge of the crossbeam. There was a faint click, and a narrow panel slid open with a soft groan. Inside, wrapped in crinkled aluminum foil, lay a small black USB drive. Maria's breath caught. Hands trembling, she retrieved the device and carefully resealed the panel. Within moments, she was racing back to her room, the icy night air burning her lungs. Locking the door behind her, Maria inserted the USB into her laptop and opened the lone file it contained. A compressed audio recording marked simply, "Confidential, March 2024. Heart hammering, she clicked play. The recording crackled to life. Several voices filled the speakers, distinct, male and female, their tones measured and cold. "They cannot be allowed to speak further," one male voice said. "Their testimonies remain a threat, even after all these years." Another voice, female, chillingly familiar, "Sister Joan, have offered assistance. Discreet measures are in place. Agnes, Bernadette, Claire, they will be relocated with no trace." Another male voice. "And the archives?" "Already handled," Sister Joan's voice replied. "The files are sealed. Only one copy remains, under my control." Maria clutched her chair, her pulse roaring in her ears. The voices continued, discussing payment to Silvercrest, coordination with external operatives, and plans for silencing any remaining dissent within the convent. The final words froze Maria's blood. "If anyone else learns of this," Sister Joan said coldly. The recording ended. Maria sat in stunned silence, the enormity of what she had uncovered settling over her like a shroud. This was the proof she needed, proof of the conspiracy, the involvement of the custodians, and the active silencing of dissent within St. Mary's. But she knew now, with chilling certainty, that discovery alone would not be enough. She had to act, and fast, for with every passing hour, the noose was tightening around her own neck. Maria stared at the laptop screen long after the recording ended, her pulse racing, each second dragging beneath the suffocating weight of what she had just heard. The voices, the names, the precise plotting. It was undeniable evidence of the conspiracy reaching to the highest echelons of the convent and beyond. But it was also proof that made her a marked woman. The custodians would stop at nothing to suppress this. She knew she could no longer trust anyone inside St. Mary's. The circle of allies was shrinking. Sister Helena had vanished from the morning prayer service, her absence raising fresh waves of fear in Maria's chest. Time was running out. She had to act now. Fueled by adrenaline, Maria made copies of the recording and encrypted them on several drives, hiding one beneath a loose floorboard in her room and keeping another on her person. Then she drafted an anonymous email attaching the recording and a detailed account of her findings, addressed to 3 investigative journalists she had found referenced in Levine's forums, reporters known for exposing abuse within religious institutions. Her fingers hovered over the send button, the enormity of what she was about to unleash settling heavily upon her. With a deep breath, Maria pressed send. The email client began uploading the attachments, the progress bar inching forward agonizingly slowly. Then, just as the upload neared completion, a new message flashed into her inbox. No subject, no sender. Her heart pounded. Hands trembling, Maria clicked it open. The body of the message contained only a single line of text. "Think carefully about what you are doing." Below it, an attached image loaded. Maria's breath caught in her throat. It was a photograph. Her 6-year-old son, Daniel, standing outside his school, lunchbox in hand, an innocent smile on his face. The timestamp showed it had been taken just hours earlier. Panic surged through her, cold and paralyzing. They were watching her family. They knew her son's routine. A strangled sob escaped her lips as she stared at the image, her mind reeling. She couldn't involve the police. The custodians likely had sympathizers embedded there. The recording remained unsent. The upload had failed mid-process. Shaking, Maria yanked the USB from her laptop and clutched it tightly. The threat was real and immediate, but she couldn't stop now. The truth demanded to be exposed. Desperate for guidance, Maria reached out to the one person she hoped could still help, Father Martin Callahan, a retired priest who had once served as internal auditor and investigator for the archdiocese. Maria had heard whispers of his disillusionment with the church's leadership and its clandestine practices. She called the number listed in the old directory, and to her relief, Father Callahan answered in a weary but steady voice. "Yes?" "Father Callahan, please forgive this intrusion. My name is Maria Doyle. I work at St. Mary's. I've uncovered something. I need to speak with you urgently." Pause. "Come to my home, now. Do not tell anyone you are coming." He gave her an address in the nearby suburb of Quincy. Within the hour, Maria stood outside a modest brick house, its small garden bare beneath the winter frost. Father Callahan answered the door himself, a tall, gaunt figure in a faded cardigan, his eyes sharp and clear despite his years. Without a word, he ushered her inside. The living room smelled faintly of pipe smoke and old books. Maria wasted no time. "Father, they've taken 3 sisters from St. Mary's. They were witnesses to an old abuse case. I have a recording, a meeting between the Mother Superior and others, planning their removal. And now they're threatening my son." Her voice broke. Father Callahan studied her intently, then nodded gravely. "I feared this day would come," he said softly. "You are entangled with the custodians now, child. They are ruthless." Maria's breath hitched. "You know of them?" He sighed. "I know too much. I served as internal auditor for nearly 15 years. There were situations, cases where troublesome clergy or dissenting voices within religious orders threatened to expose dark truths. I was ordered, under the guise of protecting the Church's reputation, to facilitate their reassignment." His face darkened. "They called it preserving sanctity, but it was a systematic purge. Those who knew too much simply vanished. No records, no trails. I left the post in disgust." Maria's voice trembled. "How many?" "More than I care to count, and now they are doing it again." Father Callahan leaned forward. "You must understand, once they move, there is little time. They will seek to neutralize you, as they did the others." Maria gripped the USB tighter. "I can't stop. I have to get this out." The old priest placed a firm hand on hers. "Then you must be clever, and you must not act alone. There are still those of us who resist, quietly, in the shadows. I will help you reach them, but you must be prepared. The path ahead will be dangerous." Maria nodded, the steel of resolve rising within her despite the fear twisting in her gut. For Daniel, for the sisters, for the truth. There was no turning back now. Maria left Father Callahan's home with a burner phone, a contact list of trusted allies, and a newfound sense of resolve, balanced precariously against the gnawing fear that every shadow now hid unseen eyes. The custodians had proven their reach. They had allies inside law enforcement and the Church itself. But Maria had something they didn't expect. A network, however small, now moving to help her. Her first priority was confirming whether the missing sisters were still alive. If the custodians had resorted to such threats against her, there was a terrible possibility the sisters had already been silenced permanently. Father Callahan put her in touch with a forensic investigator, Dr. Alan Pritchard, who specialized in tracing irregular death records linked to institutional cover-ups. Alan was a former county medical examiner turned private consultant, one of the few who dared confront church-angst abuses. 2 days later, under the cover of a stormy afternoon, Maria met Alan in a nondescript diner off I-93, the clatter of rain against the windows masking their conversation. Alan, a stoic man in his early 50s with weary eyes, slid a folder across the table. "You were right to be worried," he said grimly. "I ran the parameters you gave me, female, approximate ages, any deaths recorded in care facilities within a 2-week window of your transfer date. Something turned up." Maria's breath caught. She opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside were scanned copies of death certificates from St. Bridget's Home for the Aged, a now-defunct Catholic-run nursing home on the outskirts of Plymouth. The facility had quietly shut down months earlier following financial irregularities, another convenient layer of obfuscation. 3 entries stood out, each dated November 8th, 3 days after the so-called transfer of Sisters Agnes, Bernadette, and Claire. The names were unfamiliar, generic: Anne Morrison, age unknown; Beatrice Fields, approximate age 79; Clara Doyle, approximate age 81. But the details were threadbare: no next of kin, no medical history, only a vague cause of death, listed as natural causes. Alan tapped the page. "Here's what's strange. The bodies were cremated within 24 hours of certification, an unusual rush, even under normal circumstances. More concerning, there's no matching record of these individuals in any prior state or federal identity databases. The IDs provided were fabricated." Maria's blood ran cold. "You're saying these could be them?" Alan nodded. "I can't say for certain, but it fits. And there's more. I managed to contact a former orderly who worked at St. Bridget's up until its closure. He remembered 3 elderly women arriving under heavy escort late one night, 2 in wheelchairs, 1 needing assistance to walk. No family visits allowed. Within days, all 3 were listed as deceased." Mary's stomach twisted. Were there photos? Anything physical to identify them? Alan exhaled. The facility kept minimal documentations, but I did retrieve archived intake photos, standard policy. They're grainy, poor quality. But take a look. He produced a tablet and pulled up the images. Maria's heart pounded as she leaned in. The first image showed a frail woman with thinning gray hair, her face turned slightly away from the camera, but something about her profile tugged at Maria's memory. The second woman's photo was too blurred to be useful. Then Alan brought up the third image. The woman's face was obscured by shadows, but her right hand rested visibly in her lap. Maria gasped aloud. There, faint but unmistakable, was a long, narrow scar running diagonally across the back of her hand, a scar Maria had seen many times during morning mass, where Sister Clare would fold her hands in prayer. The same scar. Tears welled in Maria's eyes. "That's her," she whispered. "That Clare." Alan nodded grimly. "It strongly suggests these were your missing sisters, moved here under false identities, disposed of quickly, and now the facility's closure eliminates most institutional memory of the event." Maria sat back, her mind spinning. The custodians hadn't merely hidden the sisters, they had effectively erased them, using the church's own decaying structures to do so. But now Maria had proof. Documents, images, timelines that connected the disappearances to specific, deliberate actions. The risk, however, had multiplied. The custodians had already warned her once. If they learned she possessed this evidence, they would come again, and this time they would not hesitate. Alan placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "You need to be careful, and you need to get this to someone who can act on it, soon." Quietly, Maria nodded, resolve harpening through the storm of grief and fury swirling within her. She would not let the sisters be forgotten. She would not let her son live under the shadow of such corruption. And she would not stop, not now, not when the truth lay within her grasp. But even as she steeled herself, Maria sensed that the final move had yet to be played, and the forces arrayed against her were already moving again. Maria left the diner that night with Alan's photos and documents burned into her mind, her resolve crystallized into a singular mission: expose the conspiracy, liberate the sisters if they still lived, and dismantle the custodian's grip over St. Mary's and beyond. But she knew she couldn't do this alone. The failed attempt to send the recording, the traditional channels on obstruction, proved the custodian's network ran too deep for traditional channels. That was when she remembered Father Callahan's mention of the Reformist Press Fellowship, an underground network of Catholic investigative journalists committed to transparency and justice within the Church. Through Callahan's contacts, Maria was introduced to Julian Mercer, a veteran journalist known for exposing clerical abuse cases across Europe and the USS. Julian operated from a discreet office in Cambridge, surrounded by stacks of archival documents and battered camera equipment. When Maria laid the full weight of her evidence before him, the USB recording, the forensic records from Alan, the photographic proof of Sister Clare's scar, and the detailed timeline of the sisters' disappearance, he listened in grave silence, eyes narrowing as each piece fell into place. "You've got enough here to force an investigation," Julian said finally, voice low and urgent. "But we'll need to move fast. If we go public now, they'll bury the rest. We need to locate the sisters first, alive." Maria nodded. Alan's contact mentioned they were brought to St. Bridget's, but that was only a way station. They were moved after the deaths were staged. Julian tapped at his laptop, cross-referencing Maria's documents with known properties tied to custodian shell corporations. "There's a pattern," he murmured. "Several of these companies funnel money through an organization called Sanctum Vitae Foundation. It's supposed to fund elder care for retired clergy, but look, one of their listed properties is a remote facility in Berkshire County, almost no online footprint, owned through 3 layers of trusts." Maria leaned in grimly. "It fits. Remote location, no oversight. We need to get inside." Over the next 2 days, they built their case meticulously. Maria's documents were cross-verified, time-stamped, and legally notarized. Julian tapped contacts within the State Attorney General's office and arranged a quiet briefing with a trusted investigator. By the 3rd day, the district judge authorized a warrant to search the Sanctum Vitae retreat, citing probable cause of unlawful detention and conspiracy. The raid was set for dawn. Maria arrived before first light, heart hammering, standing with Julian and the small team of plainclothes officers gathered outside the tree-lined compound. The facility was a sprawling estate, hidden deep in the Berkshires, surrounded by high fences and security cameras, an unlikely sanctuary for the vulnerable it supposedly served. As the officers breached the main gate, Maria's breath caught. She followed close behind, the frigid morning air burning her lungs. Inside, the compound was eerily silent, the staff either absent or eerily cooperative. Then came the breakthrough. Behind a locked wing marked restricted access, medical isolation, the officers found 3 small, sparsely furnished rooms. In each, an elderly nun sat alone, pale, weary, eyes shadowed with fear. Sister Agnes, Sister Bernadette, Sister Claire. Alive. Maria wept openly as the officers confirmed their identities. The sisters were weak but coherent, and their stories spilled forth with a raw mixture of relief and anguish. They had been taken under false pretenses, told they were being moved for their safety. Upon arrival, they had been forced to sign documents under duress, waivers retracting their previous testimonies, and statements declaring their intent to withdraw from public life. Their supposed deaths had been staged to close the old legal case forever. "We were prisoners," Sister Agnes whispered hoarsely, tears streaking her lined face. "They told us if we spoke again, our families would suffer." Julian recorded every word, ensuring the sisters' accounts would not be buried again. Outside, as the forensic team secured the facility and the sisters were escorted to safety, Maria stood trembling beneath the gray dawn sky, the enormity of what they had uncovered settling upon her. The custodians had failed. The truth would be exposed. In the days that followed, Maria's evidence and the sisters' testimony triggered a seismic investigation across the archdiocese. Senior figures implicated in the conspiracy faced suspension and legal action. The Sanctum Victae retreat was shuttered permanently, and the story, meticulously documented by Julian, broke across national media, igniting a firestorm within the church. For Maria, the journey had come at great cost, her sense of safety forever altered. But as she watched Sister Agnes clasp her son Daniel's hand during a quiet reunion, she knew it had been worth every risk. The shadows that had haunted St. Mary's were finally brought into the light, and somewhere deep within her, Maria vowed they would never fall again. If you found this story as gripping as we did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real-life mysteries and hidden truths. And we'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below.